Hi, my name is Chanya Roy. I am a technical designer and I'm coming to you from my home office in West LA. And today we are going to balance this top. It's a very cute top, something similar to a lot of things you see in stores right now. And there are some problems with it. You can see that there's stress lines coming from the neckline to the shoulder and that it is collapsing. Here, the sleeves aren't balanced. And when you go to the back, you can see that the sleeves aren't even really appropriate for this armhole. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my trusty little snippers and cut off the sleeve. A lot of people don't like to cut garments, not sure why. It immediately shows you what the problem is and how you can correct it. And don't use big pattern shears, fabric shears, because you don't need to, and it scares the models during fitting. Okay, so I've removed the arm from the form and I'm going to cut the sleeve off along the seam. And I like to leave the seam allowance on one piece or the other, so when you pin things back together, you have something to pin one piece to. So right now, I moved the seam allowance to the sleeve and I'm cutting along the seam. And then I'm gonna go to the back of the sleeve and do the same thing. And you immediately start to see problems that exist with this garment. All right, so now you see that I made a mark where a normal sleeve should sit for both a woven and a knit. And you can see that it's a little high, the armhole, and that the front armhole gapes. And that is caused by an imbalance in the shoulder. A lot of garments are not balanced correctly at the shoulder, and that is because the pattern maker is working on the pattern flat and not actually working on the form to see how the front and back shoulder should be adjusted so that it is balanced. Another problem that I see with this garment are these drag lines from the front bust to the back, and also the back waist sits much lower than the front waist. The problem is they're not compensating for a woman's breast. And it's kind of understandable because the pattern makers in China, they're more used to seeing a Chinese body, which is usually like an A or B cup. And you have to remember, in America, the average cup size for a woman is C. And it goes way bigger than that and way smaller, but we are kind of working on the average body type right now. So when I give specs, what I usually do is I request that the front be an inch longer than the back so that it can go over the bust and still hit at the same place on the body, front and back. Your waist and your sweep, your hem, unless it's a specific design call out, should be parallel to the floor all around. So let's start looking into why the front armhole is gaping. And like I said, it is because the shoulders are not balanced. So I'm going to get up on my stool because I'm short. And I'm going to clip along the seam. And then let the garment relax and do what it wants to. So there you can see immediately that the front shoulder wants to sit way closer to the neck than the back shoulder wants to. So when you force a cut piece of fabric to sit in a way that it doesn't want to, you get a lot of stress lines. You get a lot of gaping, and it's very uncomfortable when you wear it. Okay, and then you go around to the armhole and you pin the side straight at the side seam line. Okay, now you can see that the front armhole is quite a bit higher than the back armhole, and it also sits higher on the body. So to fix the front, I actually am going to unpin it quickly and drop the whole front. That's why when I start balancing garments, I don't use a lot of pins right away because you probably will have to lift up from the form and place it where you actually want it to be. If I drop it so that the front armhole matches the back. So I put this back up here. Make sure it's smooth at the shoulders. And everything has to hang straight from the shoulders. If it's not balanced at the shoulders, you're never going to get a garment that fits well. So the front, no stress lines at the shoulders, and the back shoulder also sitting at the right place. But I want to show you something from above, and this is important to look at. So if you look now at the shoulder, you can see that the back is actually a little bit too far behind the shoulder line, and that the front is going up onto the neck. And that's a shot that I would take camera and send to the pattern maker so they know what I am discussing. Then the shoulder actually starts to look better. It's still very unbalanced, but it's not sitting as far up on the neck. So then I smooth out the armhole again, pin the shoulder into place, and kind of just look overall at the balance of the garment. So right now, the front bust is quite a bit tighter than the back bust. They didn't do a very good job of compensating for the fullness at the front. And the front hem is still sitting higher than the back. So I think the front is good. What I would do is decrease the back length to match the front. Okay, so now I start taking measurements to see what I had to tell the pattern maker to actually change. I'm going to get back on my stool again. So the front shoulder is sitting 2 3/4 inch closer to the neck than the back shoulder. I would increase the front chest a whole inch just to give it some ease so it actually bloussons properly. So to balance the hem, you measure how far up the center front is. It's 2 inches up from the marked waistline. So then I go around to the side, and the side seam is a 1/2 inch too long because it's 1/2 inch closer to the waistline. And the back is 1 inch too long. So I'm going to start pinning everything together now. It does take a little bit of time. So you can skip ahead if you want, or you can stick with me and see how I do it. And again, I try to use the seam allowances that I've left behind to pin the garment together. Because if you're not pinning to the seam allowance, then you're actually pinning into the garment, which would make it smaller than what the pattern is. As you can see, this is the seam allowance from the back of the garment. The front panel to that seam allowance. And again, we're also increasing the front chest 1 inch. So give that 1/2 inch of space right here as you're pinning. There, you can see that it now has that 1/2 inch pinned in. And then I'm going to pin the rest of the garment, blending to 0 at the sweep. If you want the garment to be just kind of looser overall, you can just add that 1/2 inch all the way down. And that is how you increase the front chest 1 inch without touching the back chest. Overall, the front chest should always be about 1 inch bigger than the back because of fullness of the front. Then I take out all the pins holding the garment to the form. Make sure it acts like an actual garment. And then kind of plop it back on the form just to make sure you didn't overcorrect anything. That what you've the changes you made are the actual changes you want to do. And it does look better. So I'm going to take the sample off the form now, and I'll show you how to do a pattern correction. Okay, so since I don't have the actual paper pattern, I'm going to show the pattern maker overseas the changes needed on the actual garment. So I laid the front out as flat as possible so that you can see the seam edges. And you really want to make sure you get at least from the center front over to the side of the garment and from the top to the bottom. So that is the picture I'm going to be taking. So I flipped the garment over, and now I'm doing the same to the back of the garment. Just going to lay it out nice and flat and take a picture of that. So I've imported my picture into Illustrator, and now I'm going to show with a line drawing how I want it to be changed. So this is the new front neckline. The new shoulder. And we're extending the shoulder out a little bit, remember? So I'm extending it out 1/2 inch. And then the chest was also increased. And that's the front armhole shape. And I just blend it to the bottom. I'm going to make sure that the line that I'm using is big enough that it will show up in my comments. And you'll see that this whole shoulder has now been rotated out. When you sew it, this front shoulder gets rotated back in, and that pulls out all the gaping from the front armhole. So this is the back of the garment, also laid out flat, and I already went ahead and drew in my corrections. I increased the back shoulder length 1/2 inch because you remember it was sitting too far back from the shoulder line. I increased the width 1/2 inch, and I redrew the armhole shape. Now at the bottom, I have to raise the hem as we discussed about the body balance. So 1/2 inch at the side seam, and then it curves up at center back. I also have to go back and decrease the side seam length on the front of the garment, which I will do before I go to the next step. I do my comments in Excel because I have room at the top to write all my comments, and then I can import pictures and show exactly how much things should be moved. So here I've said to rotate out the front shoulder 2 3/4 and increase the shoulder width 1/2 inch, increase the back shoulder width 1/2 inch, and increase the back shoulder height 1/2 inch. Remember, we were balancing the hem, so we raised it 1/2 inch at the side seams and 1 inch at the center back. And we're increasing the front chest 1/2 inch each side for 1 inch total. So that is how I balance a garment and show my corrections to the overseas factories. I hope this was interesting and informative to you. If you liked it, please subscribe, as I will be posting a lot more videos on how to balance garments, from a very basic tank top to jackets and coats. Thank you, and I hope to see you again soon.